Hello and welcome, and in this episode, Luke overthinks Time of the Daleks. Now, if you've not heard of this board game, I wouldn't be surprised, because I hadn't heard of it until a few weeks ago when I was looking into board games that I might buy with some birthday cash that I had. And the first thing to say about it is that my supplier from the local game shop has said that this game has already been discontinued, which is why I'm doing a review of it now, in case you want to get hold of a copy. You can still get them for a regular price of about £30 on Amazon. I'm assuming similar comparable rates in other countries. So if after this you're interested in buying a copy, go out and get one, because they might not be around for much longer. As you'll see from the little bar across the bottom of the screen, I've divided this review up into two halves mainly, talking about the game as a game, and then in the second half talking about the Doctor Who-ness of it, as to whether, because it might be that it's a great game and that it's not very Doctor Who or vice versa. We will see as it goes along, but if you're more or less interested in those parts, you can skip ahead with those sections. So let's quickly dive in with what the game is actually about. So strip away everything Doctor Who about the game, and this is essentially a souped up version of Yahtzee. It's a dice rolling game where you are, instead of kind of getting your Yahtzee categories, you are trying to match certain symbols on these dice to win adventures as the Doctor. There are black dice which have one symbol for each number, so there's 6 on that, and then the red and green and blue dice are weighted in different directions. So the green dice, you have a 50-50 chance of getting a running Doctor, for example, if you're trying to get one of those to complete your adventure. But how do you decide which adventures that you're going on? Well, each player has a TARDIS with a space for a Doctor and 3 companions. You are a Doctor, either the 1st, 4th, 11th or 12th Doctors, and I'm going to come back to the reasons for that later if you think that's a bit odd. And then there's a bunch of companions that you can get, and again, these are 1st, 4th, 11th and 12th Doctor companions that you can get to go along with those. And those give you different combinations of dice that you can put together to complete the adventures. And you go on these adventures by travelling to different planets: Earth, Mars, the Moon, and then loads of the Doctor Who planets that you will be familiar with. And once there, you roll your dice. You can do various things to manipulate the dice, re-roll the dice to try and get the thing that you're after. And then there will be a reward based on the planet that you're on, or a fail condition based on the dilemma that you have matched with that planet. And the way that you keep track of how everybody's doing is that you have a TARDIS marker. So this is the marker, this is your Doctor marker that goes on the adventure, and then your TARDIS marker goes round the track towards Gallifrey. And this is a semi-cooperative game. You can all lose together if the Daleks win, because the Daleks are also heading for Gallifrey, and they're also getting out there on the planets when you fail. It's semi-cooperative in the fact that only one Doctor can win. It's the first Doctor to get to Gallifrey without the Daleks getting there that wins. So you can help your fellow Doctors on adventures, but ultimately one of you is trying to beat the others to the mark at the end. So there's an element of luck with the dice rolling, and because the dilemmas that you draw to match up with the planets, you can't see the dilemma until you land on it. So there's an element of luck in both of those things. But then the strategy comes in deciding where to go, because you know, once you've started to build up your TARDIS crew, you know what coloured dice your companions provide you with, you know which ones that they can re-roll. So there is an element of strategy in saying, again, going, oh, if I go to that planet, I know what half of the code is going to be, because half of the dice that you need are on the planet and half are hidden underneath. So there is a reasonable element of strategy there. And then you do have timey-wimey cards, you have sonic charge tokens, and other things resources that you have that you can use to manipulate what happens to the dice. So whilst there's a good dollop of dicey chance, there's a reasonable amount of strategy if you don't like the chancy element of games. There are aspects of it that make things more difficult, and these are kind of couched in Doctor Who terms like fixed points in time and time locks and all this kind of stuff, which make certain adventures more difficult. And the rules do suggest that on your first game, which is the game that I'm essentially reviewing, you ignore those things. And we found, actually, once we got to grips with how the game worked, we didn't fail a single adventure. So actually, none of these little Daleks got onto the board in the game that we were playing. So I think in future games we will definitely play with those things involved to basically up the jeopardy, essentially. Overall, from a game playing point of view, it was quite enjoyable. And as ever with these things, it does depend on who you're playing with, and if you're playing with other people who are enjoying the game, and I happen to be playing with two people who really got into it and enjoyed it, and it was a great deal of fun. But you may be asking, is this a fitting Doctor Who game? Well, there's a lot to talk about in terms of how the game has been themed, and I would usually want to start with the good stuff and then finish with the little niggles. But there's a big elephant in the room with regards to this game, and that is that the game only has the 1st, 4th, 11th and 12th Doctors in it. And the reason for that is that this game has been designed to be expanded. There are even characters and cards that refer to bits that aren't in this base game. So River Song, for example, there are bonuses if she's with Doctors other than the ones here. The rulebook refers to Captain Jack. Captain Jack is not in the base game. At this point, with the game cancelled as far as I'm aware, the expansions are still out there to pre-order on a few websites, but they were originally supposed to be here a year ago. They're now being promised for the next quarter of the year, so anytime from July onwards. I'm not holding my breath as to whether they will actually materialise, pun intended there. And then there is also the cost. I've seen them listed at $15. One assumes a similar pound value in the UK. So that means for each expansion you're spending quite a lot of money. And each expansion is 2 more Doctors. So there will be 4 expansions altogether to fill in from Doctors 1 to 12. This game was conceived before the final season of Peter Capaldi, so Bill is not in it. And obviously there is nothing beyond with the 13th Doctor. So if you're looking for a game that is comprehensively Doctor Who-y, this is not it. If the expansions do materialise, then it could be if you're willing to invest in all of those things. That said, in every other regard, I think it's done really, really well. Now you might ask, why is David Tennant not in here? Being the most popular of the new Doctors, I think that's not particularly controversial to say that. I think it's partly because of the expansions, but also because there's a reasonable overlap in terms of companions between the 11th and 12th Doctors, and some of those scenarios as well. So I think that's why they've done that, and they were kind of doing it with a thought to like the 10th Doctor's going to be in it. And then the 4th Doctor, obviously most popular, most well known from the classic series, and the 1st Doctor, I'm loving the fact that he's in there because he's definitely my favourite, and has featured a reasonable amount in the new series recently. So I think it's a great representation, and literally everything, all the components that come with the game are divided pretty much, not necessarily equally, but everybody is represented in those elements. So you have companions for the 1st and 4th Doctors, you have planets that those Doctors have visited, you have some generic planets that several Doctors have visited, and then you have dilemmas which are related to those Doctors. Now obviously the dilemmas and planets can be matched up, and you kind of turn it over and you've got the Vord on the Orient Express, for example, or Trenzalore, which from a kind of story point of view makes no sense, but that's fine. And you also do have a mechanism within the game that links actual TARDIS teams up, which means that they're easier to compile. So if you want to be the 1st Doctor with Susan, Ian and Barbara, there's a mechanism within the game which allows you to collect that TARDIS team very quickly at the beginning, and you could play with it for the whole game. Equally, you can recruit and discard companions on every turn that you have, so you can have a whole cornucopia of things. And there are occasional bits in the game where you are forced to regenerate, and so you then go to the next number up. So if you were playing the 1st, you become the 4th. If you were playing the 4th, you become the 11th, and so on. And if you were playing the 12th, you go back to being the 1st. So that's quite a fun element of the game. As we didn't fail, that didn't happen to us, but it's interesting that is kind of part of the game as well. And this game is in no way skewed towards the new series, apart from in the timey-wimey cards. The timey-wimey cards are very much more new series focused in their theme, but there's a good distribution of companions. There are, in terms of like unique to a Doctor, there are more 4th Doctor planets than there are anything else. There's a good whack of First Doctor planets, First Doctor villains, and then there's a whole bunch of villains which kind of span across all the Doctors. So in spite of the fact that I said it's pretty much exclusively 1st, 4th, 11th and 12th Doctors, there is a picture of Ainley's Master in here, and some Sontarans from the 10th Doctor's era. And these, I mean, the Daleks could be from anywhere, really. So all in all, this is a pretty good representation of these 4 eras of Doctor Who. And if the expansions do come, then this could be the game that does a really good job of representing the whole swathe of Doctor Who from the beginning up until the point that this game was produced. There are a few little niggles, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention them, and that is the overlap of companions. So obviously, the 1st Doctor ends with Ben and Polly, and they aren't in the game. It just goes up to Dodo. I mean, the fact that Dodo's in it is brilliant, but Ben and Polly aren't here because presumably they were holding them off for the 2nd Doctor expansion. Similarly, the 4th Doctor era ends with Nyssa, and she is linked to Tegan, but Tegan again is not in the game. You would have to buy the 5th Doctor expansion, where I think it's the 5th and 10th Doctor are paired. You'd have to buy that expansion to get those characters. So that is a slight niggle. I understand why they've done it that way. And actually, just as a slight aside, to bump up companion numbers for the modern era, you have things like people like Jenny and Vastra and Strax, and you have Kate Stewart, and you have 2 Osgoods to bump that up, which provides a nice link back to the Brigadier. If you get hold of the Brigadier, you can then search for any other unit companions and form a unit TARDIS team if you so wish, which is really, really nice. The instruction book makes a point of thanking the proofreaders for this game, which makes this ever so slightly embarrassing that we have the planet Tarkan. So it's nice that Nyssa and Adric are represented not only in the fact that you can play them as characters, but both of their planets are in the game. So it's just a bit of a bummer that they misspelt Tarkan. There is a lovely little expansion to the game. This will become a niggle eventually. There is a lovely little expansion to the game where there is a little K9 marker, and it must have been added so late in the game that he's not in the instruction booklet, and they just had to add in a little reference card. And it's basically one more mechanism that allows you to re-roll a dice, and he passes round Doctors from turn to turn. So that's nice. However, the game doesn't count him as a companion. So, because I thought, oh, it's a shame that K9 isn't in the game. And then I looked through the Time Warp cards, and I found Handles and K9, and they are both listed as pieces of equipment. Now, I'm not particularly bothered about Handles, because I'm not a fan of the adventure in which he occurs. If you are, I can see you would be equally annoyed by the fact that Handles is listed as a piece of equipment. K9 is listed as a piece of equipment. And it does mean that you could have a TARDIS team of the Doctor, 3 companions, and K9 as well, but I just think that he doesn't deserve to be relegated to a piece of equipment. He's a proper companion. He should be represented as a companion card. Added to that, which I've just been reminded of, Romana is only represented by her 2nd incarnation, and I feel the fact that the game went to the lengths of having 2 Petronella Osgoods, they could have stretched to having Romana Mark 1 and Romana Mark 2. But all that is minor compared with the fact that actually it's a well-designed game. I mean, the playing pieces are really good. The circularity of it fits very well with the modern aesthetic of the show. All these pieces kind of fit together really, really well. The figures are well done. I'm sure if you were into painting your miniatures, you could do that too. I'm sure Clayton Hickman will have something to say about the TARDIS models if he's watching. I'm sure he's not. So overall, it's a winner. If you have a spare 30 quid lying around and you see this before the game disappears into the ether, never to be seen again, I would certainly recommend it. If the expansions do appear at some point in the future, I will no doubt get hold of at least one of them, which would, and that's actually just to say, the game is played by 4 players, unsurprisingly. The expansions promise to make it a 5 or 6 person game. If you bought all the expansions, whether you could have a 12-player game, I do not know. That would be absolutely mental and chaotic, and everybody would sit there waiting for their turn for quite a while, so perhaps that's a bad idea. Anyway, if there's more to say on this, I will do another video. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Please like, share, subscribe, all that jazz that you do with YouTube. If you're interested in supporting what I'm doing here to enable me to continue making regular videos, please head over to my Patreon. I'd love to see you over there. Patreon viewers who have supported me at a certain level will get to see next week's video straight away, but you can wait a whole week for it, you lovely people, and I will see you back here in well, hopefully a week. Part of me doing a Patreon is that I can't guarantee my regularity at the moment, but you will see my next video if you subscribe to this channel, no problem. Thank you all for watching.